Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. I'm your host, John Barry, and today we're going to be previewing and predicting the NBA Finals. Let's get into it. Okay, so we are all set up for a San Antonio Spurs versus New York Knicks NBA Finals. We had an awesome Western Conference Finals. I just had a short the other day, if you want to check it out, ranking what I thought were the 10 best playoff series, or at least my personal favorite playoff series since I've been a fan of the NBA and been watching. And Spurs Thunder was right in the middle of the list. Like, this was an all-time historic series when you're talking about what we got from a talent aspect, having the two best teams in the league with arguably the two best players in the league, depending on how you feel about a guy like Nikola Jokic, but him, Shea, Wemby, I think maybe some people disagree, but for the most part, that's going to be your top three. That's who I would rank in the top three. Then you had two best teams, Thunder, Spurs, with the two best young cores. It was just all there. And then you had the narrative aspect of the Thunder become the villains of the league. They were defending champs, but the general populace does not like them at all. Wemby, of course, has had all the hype since coming to the league, being one of the greatest prospects ever, having this GOAT potential around him, being something we've never seen before. And can he do something unprecedented, or nearly unprecedented, I should say, probably the first since like Bill Walton, to take a team, or I guess Bill Walton actually won it. There may have been like Kareem took a team, Shaq took a team. So there have been young centers, but somewhat unprecedented in the modern era of being this young, this good, this fast as the best player on the best team. That's what we got in the West. And then on the East, we got the exact opposite of New York running through the Eastern Conference, sweeping Philly in the semis, and then sweeping Cleveland, James Harden, Donovan Mitchell in the conference finals in a series that was over really after game one. They ripped their hearts out with the comeback, a game I stopped watching. I thought, because I was going to play pickup soccer, I thought it was over, thought it was safe. Come back, and I'm like, wait, what happened? I had to go back and watch it, and I'm just like, wow. And the series was over from then. Cleveland never responded. And now we get Knicks Spurs. We get Madison Square Garden. The New York Knicks haven't been to the finals in 50 something years. Their fans are going crazy. One of the biggest brands in basketball versus the future face, maybe current face of the league. This guy who will nearly undoubtedly be one of the best players of all time, really, and probably the best player of this generation, and many of us will ever see. And this truly an all-time finals matchup. And it's also a rematch of the 1999 finals. Tim Duncan, his first ever finals win, first finals appearance coming against New York. That's pretty cool. And it's also a rematch of the NBA Cup this year. Another short I made breaking down the winners and losers talked about, does the NBA Cup get some more credibility? Because of the four teams who were left in the Cup, it was Spurs, Thunder on one side, Knicks. Oh, I can't remember who the Knicks had to beat on the other side. I'm blanking. But three of the four were also three of the four left in the playoffs. We had Spurs, Thunder again. The Spurs beat them. We had Knicks win the East, play the Spurs in the NBA Cup, which the Knicks won. So we have the Knicks going for the double. Is that what we're calling it? Like a little European soccer term now? If you win both, and we do have a rematch. So maybe the NBA Cup is gaining a bit more, credibility, or will gain a bit more credibility as the years go on if the teams that do well in that also continue to do well in the playoffs. And that's a good segue into actually breaking down the series, why I think, or what we could see happen, what I think is most likely, and eventually who I think is going to win the series. And I say it's a good segue because I thought the Spurs were going to win the NBA Cup final after they beat the Thunder. It was like, wait, they just beat OKC. This was at the time people were talking. Maybe it looks a little bit silly now, but there was discussion when they were like 20 something and one, of like, could they possibly get 73? Like, how many games is this Thunder team going to win? How good are they going to be? And then the Spurs beat them, but then they couldn't beat the Knicks. And that is just interesting because, on one hand, and I know how good the Knicks have been, but on one hand, it does feel like Spurs Thunder was the NBA Finals, like everything was building to that series. It was the culmination of everything. We saw the emotion that was invested in that series. We saw what it looked like after they won that 7-game battle, like Wemby crying. These guys, this meant everything. And there's just a chance that that was your NBA Finals, that everything you had for this series, I know it's the NBA Finals. I know it might sound crazy, but you might not get up for the Knicks the way you did for the Spur or for the Thunder, because you may have already left it out all out on the floor. You might not have enough left for a well-rested Knicks team. I think that's something that could potentially hurt the Spurs, a young team that may have felt like everything was building to beat the Thunder, and now you reached your mountain, you climbed your summit, and you might just not have enough left for the New York Knicks. That is one concern. And where I think that can show up is, I know you have a little bit more rest. It's not like how the Sixers or Cavs had, because the Knicks have had the advantage of both their last series. The Sixers had to come off a brutal 7-game series, very short rest. And then the Cavs had to come off a brutal 7-game series, very short rest. And now the Spurs have to come off a brutal 7-game series, not as short of rest, but still shorter rest than the Knicks. And they could immediately lose home court advantage if the Knicks return to the finals for the first time in, decades. Like, this is a huge moment. If the Spurs come out a bit tired and the Knicks are well rested and they keep up this hot streak, which we'll talk about in a second, the Knicks are up 1-0 and home court advantage has flipped, and the Knicks are now 3-1 against the Spurs in the season because they're already 2-1 overall in the regular season. And that's how the series could change, right? That's that's what happened to Philly. They took Philly's heart early. That's what happened to Cleveland. And I think the Spurs will respond. I think they're better than those teams. But I'm just saying that is the risk of having a younger, more tired team that maybe already thinks they achieved the biggest achievement. But I will say, I think because it is the NBA Finals, I think there has to be somewhat of an element of, that wasn't enough. I think they do have eye on a bigger prize. But I do just worry about being tired, about a little bit, just a little bit of, complacency and beating what seemed like the best team in the league. Like, if we beat the Thunder, we can beat anybody. That might not be the case. So that's one concern and maybe one advantage in the Knicks' hand. Of course, you can flip it around and say, well, maybe the Knicks are rusty now. Maybe this hot streak, which again, I'm going to talk about more in a second, but this incredible run of basketball the Knicks have been on, maybe having this extra rest is bad. And maybe you don't have that anymore. And now you come out and you don't look great in game one. Similar like the Thunder we've seen struggle with rest, like SGA has coming off of long breaks. If the Knicks aren't firing on all cylinders, they come out flat. And now maybe just like that, their momentum's gone. Maybe they're back to being still a very good team, still an overperforming team, but maybe not the historic level of team they have been playing at, because since game 3 of the first round, where they were down 2-1 to the Hawks, they have been, and this is not hyperbole, the best team in the history of basketball. No one has been this dominant ever. This is an 11 straight game winning streak. Whether you're looking at they went 11-0, whether you're looking at point differential, whether you're looking at 30-point wins, 40-point wins, 50-point wins, whether you're looking at competition, because no one has done this regular season or postseason. So even teams that played 11 straight games against bad teams, potentially tanking teams, no one has ever in the history of the NBA, as far back as the data goes, been as dominant as the New York Knicks have been over the past 11 games. Jalen Brunson has been excellent. Karl-Anthony Towns has been excellent and kind of turned himself into a new player. When you would have thought of Karl-Anthony Towns before, you would have thought of playoff struggles and maybe defensive liability. His defense has gotten a lot better in these playoffs. He's a playoff riser at this point, and he's also just changed his game. He's an offensive hub in a way he's never been. He's always showed flashes of playmaking potential, but he's just getting triple doubles. I think like averaging 7 assists in these playoffs. He's just playing at an offensive level we hadn't seen from him really ever, because playmaking had never been to this level. And now the defense is better. Like, this is just a much better player than we ever seen from Karl-Anthony Towns. Brunson's always a playoff riser. OG Anunoby is almost now inarguably the best 3-and-D wing in basketball, getting that level of defense, that level of shot making, especially like the late buzzer shots with OG are just ridiculous. Mikal Bridges, after what had been a rough stretch, like Mikal Bridges had been known as the guy like, oh, they overpaid. 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, like that's a thing that would commonly be said, and he was no longer the defensive player of the year candidate he was when he was on my Phoenix Suns. I thought he should have won over Marcus Smart. He hasn't been to that level, but the defense is getting back, and after an inefficient start to the playoffs, he's now one of the best, most efficient players in these playoffs since then. They're just making all their shots. Landry Shamet shooting 60% from 3. The whole team just can't seem to miss. It's infectious. The confidence is there. And right now they look unstoppable, which I think leaves us with a few options. And I'm thinking about it as like a seemingly unstoppable force, like moving in this direction. I think of it kind of like a bicycle. I think is a good analogy that's been used before. The wheels are turning really fast. If the wheels get caught, right, it can just come to a crashing halt. So if there is rust, or if the jump from playing the Sixers with a beat up and Embiid who aren't very good, and the Cavs who had to take the Raptors to 7, and the Pistons to 7, and just weren't really that good of a team, the jump to the Spurs and the best defensive player of the modern era, could that just be, the spoke, or not the spoke in the wheel, but the thing getting in the spokes of the wheels, that instead of just slowing you down, you come crashing to a halt, and you're like for this rude awakening, culture shock type of moment. We weren't ready for this. I think that's got to be a concern for the Knicks. But the alternative is, well, there's actually two, maybe three alternatives. But an alternative is, it's actually, the momentum is all there. It doesn't matter who we're playing. We could see the 96 Bulls. We could play the 2018 Warriors. The stats aren't lying. We actually are just right now on the most dominant stretch in history. And it doesn't matter who's in front of us. That's not stopping. We're just playing too high level of basketball. That is on the board. I would not bet on it. I wouldn't bet on anything. But I'm say that I would not believe that to be the case. I think that's highly unlikely that the New York Knicks have gone from average 3 seed, good playoff team, to historic level in just mere moments. Like, I expect them to come back to earth, a bit of regression to the mean, but I also don't expect the full stop. Right? I expect a little bit of what we saw with the Thunder, who played the Suns, swept them, played the Lakers, swept them. I think you would see that jump from Suns, Lakers, Spurs, where it was like, oh, this is a lot harder. Doesn't all come to a crash it down. We're still in the series. We're still fighting. We're still really good. But there is like, oh, this is a lot harder. This is a different level of basketball. I think you could see the same thing from the Knicks of, yeah, we crushed the Sixers. Yeah, we crushed the Cavs. Oh, the Spurs are better than these teams. Oh, it is really hard to score at the rim on Victor Wembanyama. Oh, when you have that back line and you can throw Stephon Castle and all these perimeter defenders who just did, like Carter Bryant, if he gets spot minutes. I know he struggled at times, but he's really good defensively at times. He could bother Brunson. Stephon Castle can bother Brunson. Everything they just did to throw off Shea, which outside of game 6 and 7, and really game 7, his game 6 was mostly the free throws, which Brunson can do as well. But outside of that, just tons of success guarding Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, who's basically a better version of Jalen Brunson when you're looking at what a guard can do from a scoring aspect. And look, I think Brunson is a phenomenal player, been a playoff riser. I also think Becky Hammon's quote, sorry, I gotta get some water real quick, but we're talking about Becky Hammon. But the Becky Hammon quote that everyone likes to talk about is just like historically right. Small players don't win championships as the best player. It's Steph Curry, it's Isaiah Thomas, and Steph Curry one of the years wasn't Finals MVP, even though he probably should have been, and Isaiah Thomas one of the years wasn't Finals MVP. So, unless you are these unique outlier players, Steph Curry, greatest shooter ever, best offensive player, or changing, I should say, revolutionizing the way offense is played, it's just not going to happen as a small player. So there is a historical aspect of this to which I look back and say, would it make more sense to look back in 10 or 5, 10, 15 years and I say, wow, Victor Wembanyama, one of the greatest players we've ever seen, was just historically great, made the championship that early, won Finals MVP, en route to what became one of the greatest careers I ever witnessed. Does that make more sense? Or does it make more sense for me to think of Jalen Brunson, undersized, overachieving second-round pick, actually cleared the hurdle of this freak of nature, young core that's been better than any young core I've seen in my time as an NBA fan? He really got over that hurdle. Like, that is a lot in my mind to make that jump. I know how good they're playing, but there is an element of just like, he's small, Wemby's big, and that's that. Because a lot of times in the NBA, it has mattered who your best player is. And I know the Pacers came close, and I know the 03 Pistons with Chauncey Billups, like, I know they won the title, but these are outliers. I'm not trying to predict based on the outlier examples. You try to predict based on what's most likely to happen, and what's most likely to happen can be found through historical patterns which say the Spurs roster is more built like what a championship team in the NBA has looked like, except for the youth aspect, which I do know. If you want to talk about the youth, there's that. But for me, is it harder to wrap my head around, okay, the Spurs overcame youth with what was the greatest prospect ever, or the Knicks overcame, basic roster construction deficiencies, and as well as like just the elevation from regular season to playoffs is pretty unprecedented as well. Like, they overcame all of that. That's harder for me to believe. So I think that's just another point in the Spurs' favor. But before I actually make my pick, I did want to talk about like what the matchups look like a little bit here, what we're going to see on the court. And I do think there are some key advantages because I think the Knicks are maybe uniquely built in a way to counter Wemby with this two-man, big man attack unit they have, as well as what Wemby is going to have to do when they have the single big. Because if they're two bigs, right? Mitchell Robinson is one of the best rebounders of the game. That's a counter there. Cat, if you so you can't just Wemby's not just going to kill you on the boards, right? Which is a big strong point of his game. Cat then best stretch big arguably in NBA history. He's going to pull Wemby away from the rim when Wemby's on him. I imagine Wemby, a lot of teams like to do, put Wemby on Josh Hart, someone else on the Spurs, whoever's playing the four, whether it's Carter Bryant, Harrison Barnes, Justin Champagnie, like whoever they're going to be running at the four in those minutes, you're going to have to guard Cat. Cat then is going to have a mismatch, and with the way he's been playing, you think he'd be able to exploit that pretty well, whether that is stretching them out, whether that is scoring inside. Probably not going to be as much scoring inside because when you do this, Wemby is then a help side defender who can guard the paint. But with the way Josh Hart's been shooting, I don't know that's a winning strategy because all the Knicks have just been hitting all their shots. So if you're going to leave Josh Hart open, say, yeah, we're going to let Josh Hart beat us, like ask Philly how that worked, right? Like it's been tried this postseason. You're not the first team to have a rim protecting big and be like, okay, what if we played off Josh Hart? It's not a groundbreaking strategy. So I think the Spurs can deploy that, but I do think the Knicks having a lot of guys who are shooting well, as well as bigs that counter from rebounding and counter from a stretch aspect, is maybe the best counter you'll see to Wemby in the entire league, really. The Thunder just didn't have that. With how Chet, like, theoretically, you should have Isaiah Hartenstein rebounder, Chet pull out, but Chet, I mean, we all watched what Chet was doing. He wasn't stretching the floor. He wasn't aggressive offensively, and he wasn't rim protector. There was nothing Chet was really providing that series, which is why a lot of the discourse around him is so bad right now. And then we talked about what their Spurs are going to do, throwing perimeter guys onto Brunson. I don't think it's going to be the toughest challenge he's seen so far, but it will be a lot harder in Cleveland, a lot harder in Sixers. What the Hawks had in Dyson Daniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker outside of OKC with Wallace, Caruso, Dort is like maybe the best perimeter defense you could have for Jalen Brunson. And it's no shock. That was his worst series, and he had some games where he really struggled. But Stephon Castle, the Spurs back line, the waves of perimeter defenders they throw at you is no joke and is going to challenge him in a way he hasn't seen since at least the first round, maybe the entire playoffs when you factor in what he's going to have to do once he gets past guys to the bucket, and it's going to be so hard to get past guys in the first place. And let me check my notes. I think the last thing that I will say here before I just give my final pick is that part of the advantage the Spurs had in some of those games was so much more offensive shot creation because Harper is stepping up and Castle is, and Vassell can create a shot at times. Champagnie, he's more of an off-ball shooter, but he can do a little bit of some stuff. Obviously, Wemby, Keldon Johnson's a sixth man of the year, where there's just so many waves of guys who do stuff. And the Knicks are kind of similar in that way. Like OKC, if you triple team Shea, you weren't worried about other guys creating offense. OG can do more stuff than the guys on OKC had. Not Mitchell and Jalen Williams necessarily, but they weren't playing most of the series. OG, Mikal Bridges, Cat, like these guys are just better offensive players than what OKC had outside of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that can challenge the Spurs defense in a different way. And considering all their confidence, I do think we'll push the Spurs to the limit in these NBA Finals. But after breaking it all down, I do think the Spurs are going to win. I've said I'm picking whoever comes out of the West. I thought Boston had a chance at East once Boston showed like once Boston went out and it was like, oh, they don't have it. I have not really ever considered not picking the Spurs or Thunder. I thought it was going to be the Thunder, but whoever ended up coming out of that series was always going to be my pick to win the NBA title. And yeah, for me, the Spurs, with this roster they have, I know how young it is. I am believing in the generational talent of Victor Wembanyama to overcome the New York Knicks like Tim Duncan did in 1999, winning his first championship, to revenge the NBA Cup, to claim this ultimate prize that it's everything that he's looking for. He didn't get his MVP, but he got his DPOY. He's going to host the Finals MVP. I said it when I reacted to the Thunder losing. The age of Victor Wembanyama, I do believe, is here. I think it's going to last for many years to come. I think he might win a lot of these. I think the first one is coming. These playoffs. Give me Spurs over the Knicks. I'm taking them in 6 to win it in the Garden, Game 6. That's all I have for today, though. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I thank you guys all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment Who do you guys have? And also let me know, because this is some of my first time doing longer style breakdown of a series like this. Let me know, did you enjoy this video and any recommendations for it? With that being said, I thank you all for watching.